Julian Assange was arrested in London, ending 7 years of asylum and confinement in his tiny room within the Ecuadorian embassy. He is likely to be extradited to the United States, where he would face criminal charges for hacking crimes according to the DOJ, specifically for offering to help Chelsea Manning to crack a password, an offer which did not lead to a successful action. Some, such as Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald, have claimed that the arrest is a threat to journalism. Greenwald calls the hacking charge a thinly disguised pretext for prosecuting Assange for publishing the US government's secret documents. Others, including The Economist, have been rooting for extradition, calling his alleged hacking conspiracy a serious crime. And others still have gone far beyond criticizing his possible hacking help to insist that Assange is not the champion of transparency that he portrays himself as being.
I don't think that Julian Assange is a journalist.
So let's talk about it. Is he a journalist? Since the arrest of Julian Assange, there have been no shortage of headlines claiming that the divisive figure is anything but a journalist. Now, it would be redundant to go over every argument presented in each of these pieces, but let's delve into some of the key criticisms these and other articles make. There are two central critiques that you hear about Assange repeated ad nauseum. One is that Assange put people, especially American military personnel and intelligence assets, at risk. The second, in my view weaker concern, is that he is a tool of the Kremlin. First, let's deal with the first concern. In perhaps the most thorough anti-Assange piece I listed here, the National Review article by David French, the author goes into great detail into some of the potential harm Assange caused. For example, French cites a piece in commentary by Jonathan Foreman, which mentions a 2008 leak of a 2004 report. One that, according to Foreman, included details of the workings of the US Army's Warlock system for jamming the homemade bombs called IEDs set off by cell phone or radio transmitter. The report concerned the problematic way the jammers interfered with regular military communications, but its publication ensured that anyone anywhere in the world who wanted to figure out how to defeat the Warlock now had means to do so. This is a very damaging argument against Assange and WikiLeaks. If true, it identifies a leak that could have potentially put service people in danger. By 2008, IEDs had already become an increasing concern for coalition forces, and casualties from the devices continued to grow in frequency until 2010, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. As French argues, I find it plainly obvious that the primary value of those reports was to the enemy, not the public. Assessments of how different kinds of IEDs harm different kinds of military vehicles is valuable information to a jihadist. But as this graph reveals, there was no sudden surge in IED-related losses either in general or as a proportion of total casualties following the leak. The growth continued along the same predictable trajectory until it peaked in 2010. So if the information WikiLeaks revealed was so dangerous, why didn't it have any perceivable effect? Maybe these vital US military secrets had real power, but America's enemies, for whatever reason, ignored the information. Or possibly the information wasn't quite as dangerous as advertised. As that commentary writer Foreman even pointed out in his article, WikiLeaks defenders asserted that by the time the report was released, technology had moved on, and US forces in the field were largely using new jamming devices. He actually provides no counterargument to that point. Instead, he cites a theoretical ally of Assange who disagreed with his decision to leak. Then he quotes Assange, whose explanation of the leak reveals clear compassion for those very US troops whose lives he apparently has no concern for. US soldiers are not happy that literally billions have gone on these jammers, with apparently little thought going into how soldiers are going to communicate after they have been turned on. So contrary to Foreman's and French's claims that the information was of no journalistic value, Assange was actually trying to reveal to the public a concern he at least believed the troops had with how the jammers created communications problems. Again, there's no evidence that the leak caused harm, but it is clear that the leak had a journalistic purpose. Nevertheless, Assange's opponents have another very clear example, not of Assange actually putting lives at risk, but clearly stating his evil intentions. Foreman and French both cite an incident in which Assange ruthlessly insists on publishing Afghan war logs without redacting the names of US assets whose lives would obviously be put at risk. This was also a central concern pointed out by Christy Blatchford of the Canadian centre-right paper The National Post. She explained that a group of journalists asked him to redact the names because
the publication of their names would put their lives at risk. The Taliban, a murderous cult essentially, would surely have killed them.
Upon hearing this, Blatchford, now quoting Nick Cohen of The Guardian, reads Assange's apparent reply.
Quote, "Well, they're informants, so if they get killed, they've got it coming to them. They deserve it."
When I first heard this, I thought that was very dark, and so too apparently did his compatriots.
A silence fell upon the table, Cohen says, as the reporters realized that the man who had been hailed by so many as a hero and a leader in a new age of transparency was, as Cohen said, willing to hand death lists to psychopaths.
Now, Blatchford would go on to explain that while it is not a law that journalists must protect lives, it is generally seen as a serious consideration, obviously. She argues that he is not a journalist because he had no such concerns.
I think that there are very few of us who would ever deliberately, willingly put somebody else's lives at risk.
She's absolutely right, and now, of course, I'm sure she'll explain how Assange's recklessness here led to American assets being revealed, compromised, and harmed.
The way that Assange was willing to. The reporters succeeded, by the way, and the names of the Afghans were deleted.
What? Hold on. She said that pretty quickly. Let's play that again.
The reporters succeeded, by the way, and the names of the Afghans were deleted.
Okay, so not only did no harm come from the names being released, he actually didn't release the names at all. So for all we know, when he said he was willing to put lives at risk, he might have been making a crude, dark joke. This point about Assange being determined to put out names has been repeated over and over again. And Blatchford is actually the first of his critics I've seen to actually include the fact that he didn't actually put the names out. French and Foreman did not have that much integrity. They only state Assange's evil intentions, or misinterpreted joke, or dumb idea that he decided against before taking action. Whatever it was a thought, a statement, not an action. And this is a key pillar of the Assange is not a journalist argument. Honestly, that's pathetic. Now let's move on to the dumber of the two arguments, that Assange is some kind of Russian asset. I feel like we've heard that before about other people. Again, we can go back to French's article in the National Review. He writes, "And don't think for a moment that he was an equal opportunity offender, a non-biased publisher, an advocate for transparency who merely sought to reveal hidden truths. No, his disclosures were like guided missiles aimed at his enemies and helping his friends. And his friends helped him. Vladimir Putin has defended him. The Kremlin has paid him. And its agents have allegedly supplied him with the very information he used to disrupt the 2016 election." Okay, so he makes three key points here. Putin defended him, the Kremlin paid him, and its agents allegedly supplied him with information. The first point is not worth talking about. If it were a crime for Vladimir Putin to defend you, Trump would already be sitting in a jail cell, along with puppies and ABBA. That's right, Putin apparently loves ABBA. And I think we can all agree that defending ABBA is a lot harder than defending Assange. Now let's skip to the third point, that Russian agents allegedly supplied Assange with information. Obviously, like point number one, this doesn't matter. It's not a crime for a journalist to get information from a hacker or a foreign agent. It's also worth noting that there's a reason French says allegedly, as it speaks to his deceptive presentation of information. Mueller's report, released after French's article, supports the claim that the DNC leaks were hacked or otherwise remotely retrieved by Russians. The counter-narrative that the emails and documents were received as a result of an internal leak and not hacking or remote access at all was, prior to French's article, well supported through investigations conducted by VIPs, as well as Nathan Freitas, and the fact that James Comey testified testified that the FBI had not conducted its own investigation on the hacked hardware, relying instead on quick assessments by private cyber firms. Assange himself frequently denied that it was a hack or in any way assisted by the Russian government.
We can say, we have said repeatedly over the last 2 months that our source is not the Russian government and it is not a state party.
Finally, let's take on point 2, that the Kremlin paid Assange. Fortunately, on that point, French links to a Vox article to support his claim. One titled "The WikiLeaks Russia Connection Started Way Before the 2016 Election" by Zach Beauchamp. Clearly, this article will defend French's point that Russia has paid Assange. Outside of a subtitle, the word appears 4 times within the article. First, the author writes, "These indictments don't prove, as some have alleged, that Assange is some kind of paid Russian agent, or that WikiLeaks is a Russian front organization." Okay, that one was a bit of a miss. Fortunately, skipping ahead by a paragraph, we have a quote by Chris Zappone, who Vox identifies as an editor at the Age newspaper in Assange's native Australia, who has covered Assange's Russian ties extensively. Zappone is quoted as saying, "I don't necessarily think he's some sort of paid agent for the Russians, but I do think he's being manipulated by the Russians." Okay, so far the word paid has only appeared in the article to indicate all the ways he was not paid by the Russians. Finally, the word paid appears 2 more times. Under the provocative subheading, Assange was literally paid by the Russian government. Here, indeed, the article asserts, Assange was paid by the Kremlin, and he was paid by an authoritarian government, in this case also referring to Russia. How does the Vox article establish this payment? Well, they cite information gathered from a New York Times article. That original New York Times piece explained, Russia Today began broadcasting a show called The World Tomorrow, with Mr. Assange as the host. How much he or WikiLeaks was paid for the 12 episodes remains unclear. In a written statement, Sunshine Press, which works as a spokesman, said Russia Today was among a dozen broadcasters that purchased a broadcasting license for his show. Now, because Russia Today is a network funded by the Russian government, and they bought for an undisclosed amount syndication rights for a 12-episode broadcast from Julian Assange, Vox interprets this as the Kremlin paying Assange. The Vox article at least points out that it was for a show. It points out that he was never an employee of RT. They were just among several broadcasters that bought a license to air his show. David French left all these facts out. He simply states that the Kremlin paid Julian Assange and cites the Vox article, expecting it seems that you will never check his sources. So in a twisted case of perhaps intentional broken telephone, a government-funded broadcaster purchasing rights to air Assange talking is twisted to mean that he is a paid asset of the Russian government. This is a deranged standard, one that would posthumously make Biggie Smalls an agent of the British government if tomorrow the BBC licensed the song Juicy for a TV show. In case you're still convinced that Assange is in the pocket of Russia, I'll point out that in July of 2012, WikiLeaks began posting more than 2 million leaked emails from Syrian government officials. Syria is, of course, a Russian ally. Then in September of 2017, WikiLeaks began posting the first of 650,000 documents leaked from surveillance contractors working for the Kremlin. So far, we've dismissed these attacks as being unsubstantiated, deceptive, certifiably false, or irrelevant. But it should be noted that actually all of these attacks are irrelevant, even if they were proven to be true. Wouldn't Assange's claim to journalism still stand even if he received money from Russia? How about releasing information that is potentially dangerous or having no concern for the lives of certain people? These lies, if true, would certainly make Assange a bad person, but they do not speak to whether or not he is a journalist. As WikiLeaks themselves have pointed out via Twitter, Assange and his organization have won quite a lot of journalism awards. That would be pretty strange if he weren't a journalist. At their best, journalists find and reveal critical information to the public. Information that helps citizens to better understand their government, their country, and their world. Journalism is the only private sector job specifically protected by the US Constitution for its vital role in protecting citizens from the tyranny of ignorance. Assange has a long history of engaging not only in journalism, but in the most dangerous kind of journalism, exposing the public to truths that the powerful want to keep buried. In 2007, he revealed a manual of standard operating procedures for overseeing terror suspects in Guantanamo Bay. In 2008, WikiLeaks posted emails from Sarah Palin, the then GOP vice presidential contender. In 2010, WikiLeaks posted the US military video of an Apache helicopter murdering two Reuters journalists and Iraqi civilians, including first responders and children.
Oh, it's their fault for bringing their kids to a battle.
That's right. Crazy Horse 1-8, request permission to engage.
You're picking up the wounded? Yeah, we're trying to get permission to engage. Come on, let us shoot.
That year, they also published the Afghan war logs, which, among other things, revealed records of previously undisclosed civilian casualties by US and coalition forces. And in 2016, WikiLeaks released the DNC leaks, which revealed that the party had colluded with the Clinton campaign to prevent the nomination of Bernie Sanders. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what WikiLeaks has revealed to the world, but it's enough to make the point. Assange's organization has informed Americans about unlawful, immoral, reckless, and incompetent behavior conducted by American institutions and government officials. There's no question over the newsworthiness of his leaks, nor the bravery and self-sacrifice involved in making oneself an enemy of the most powerful people in the world. Compare Assange's legacy of fact-finding and information dissemination to that of any other journalist working today. Who else has done more to inform citizens of the secrets its government have kept from them? Certainly, none of his critics can claim to have contributed as much to journalism as has Assange. I would recommend you pick one of these so-called journalists and check out their bio page and the publication they write for. Google them. Check out their Wikipedia page. Then ask yourself, is he a journalist?
You have a black SUV or bongo truck picking up the bodies. Request permission to engage.
Bushmaster 7, Roger. This is Bushmaster 7, Roger. Engage.
1-8, engage. Clear.
Come on.